1. Growing up, I spent a lot of time living with my grandma at her place. Now, for context, my grandma did not live in a house. She lived in a cabin in the middle of the woods, completely off-grid on a multi-acre property. No power, no water, nothing. There was a generator that we would use for about an hour a day to use basic amenities and whatnot, but for the most part it was dark and cold. Living off-grid also means there are no bathrooms, only outhouses. So that being said, anytime you needed to use the restroom, you had to walk a pretty long distance from the cabin to the outhouse, about a football field's length or so. During the daytime, it's not a problem at all. You can see and it's not as intense. However, at night it's a different story. One night while I was staying with her, I had woken up desperately needing to pee. Usually if I needed to go in the middle of the night, she wanted me to wake her up so she could walk me. But I was feeling independent, or as independent as a 10-year-old can feel. I quietly got out of bed and made my way to the door, grabbing a flashlight as I went. I started walking through the dense woods to the outhouse when I heard a branch snap in the distance. Now at this point, I was already deeply regretting not waking my grandma up to walk with me. But hearing an animal or something walk not 40 feet from me scared me so bad I froze. My mind immediately went to thinking it was a mountain lion or another aggressive animal. But when I pointed my flashlight in the direction of the sound, my heart hit the floor. There, standing less than a rock's throw away, was a person. I was completely frozen in place, not being able to process what I was seeing. It wasn't a normal person. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Their face was contorted into a vile grin, teeth bared and neck tilted. They were standing weird, their stance wide up, but their shoulders hunched, with a tilted neck. It looked unnatural. At this point, I'm not even sure I was breathing. I remember the flashlight in my hand shaking so bad that I couldn't tell if the figure was moving closer to me, or if it was just a trick of the light. And that's when it started to beckon me. Its contorted body began moving its arm to summon me to it. It was like watching someone try to beckon their pet. And while it did this, its grin widened impossibly, and his head seemed to fall even more to the side, almost at a completely inverted angle, like his neck was broken. I was horrified. It was at that moment that the fear seemed to shake the shock from my body, and I broke into a full sprint. In classic horror movie fashion, I tripped and dropped my flashlight, but that didn't stop me. I bounced off the ground and continued to run for my life, blasting through the front door so hard I fell to the ground inside the cabin. My grandma awoke to this and came sprinting inside to see what the hell was going on. Breathlessly, with tears streaming down my face, I said nothing, just pointed. There outside, with the flashlight's beam perfectly illuminating it, was the crooked man, still beckoning me with its hand. My grandma's reaction to this was honestly the scariest part. She seemed utterly unaffected and proceeded to open the front door, much to my screaming disapproval. She walked down the front porch, into the dark, and began yelling at the man. "I told you to leave. You're not welcome here," she said. "Not moving on is one thing, but scaring my granddaughter is my last straw. Leave before I make you leave." And with that, she came back into the cabin and locked the door. I stood there in complete shock. "Grandma, why is that man at your house?" I sat with fear, still riddling my body. And her response made my body run cold. "He used to live here, but he died. He can't seem to move on, even though he chose to leave this world." I was floored. "How did he die, Grandma?" I asked. And my grandma, the ever so honest woman she is, told me exactly how. "He hung himself in those trees over there, and that seems to be where he stays." 2. I wouldn't call myself a medium or anything of that nature, but my whole life I have felt like I have seen things and been connected to something that just never felt right. I have always had odd paranormal experiences that nobody else has had or seen around me. Both my parents had had unexplainable feelings and premonitions. I don't particularly believe in that and would usually just brush it off to everyone just being crazy. I honestly have started to think that I was, or am, crazy. My mom used to see things that would come true, but not like see the future type, but see things that would have significance to events yet to come. For an example, one night after moving into her house, she had several dreams of snakes, visions of snakes everywhere, and she mentioned it to me, but I thought she was just crazy. Nights later, her fiancé at the time got up to use the bathroom and stepped on something squishy. He flipped the lights on to discover a snake. They called animal control only to discover an infestation of snakes in the attic. My mom was very artistic and would draw things and always talked about visions of apples and would always tell me, "Don't bite the apple." She would reference Snow White biting the apple and going into a deep sleep, Eve biting the apple, etc. Close to her passing, she made this reference a lot. Oddly enough, my mom was hospitalized and went into a coma where she passed away a month after being in the coma. It freaked me out, honestly, and I'm sure you're probably thinking that it was just chance that she died, the same way she kept mentioning. That's what I thought too. My great-grandmother was in the hospital close to her death, and said that my great-grandfather had been visiting her. He passed away years prior, and she said that he was coming to get her. Days later, she passed. My father fell to his knees one day and said he felt in his chest that something was wrong with our cousin. Shortly after, he got a phone call saying he had been killed in a car accident. To give a few references of these unexplained events that have happened to me, I'm going to drop a few stories and honestly would like to see what anyone thinks. Is it all in my head? Or could there be a slight chance that maybe I'm not crazy? When I was a toddler, probably 3 or so, my mom and I were driving and we passed a wreck on the road. A semi had crushed a car and the vehicle was destroyed as it was onto the semi. The vehicle was so bad you couldn't tell the make or model barely. As we passed by, I started shouting at Mom that it was my aunt. My body knew and I kept saying it over and over. My mom reassured me that it wasn't, as you couldn't see the person trapped under, nor tell the vehicle. We arrived at my grandmother's house, where we received a call saying that my aunt had been in a wreck and had went under the semi. The woman trapped under was in fact her. When I was around 10 or 11, I went to visit a friend's family with them on a family trip in upstate New York. They lived down a back street, but all close by each other in what felt like a family compound. The first few days felt completely fine, but there was one night where we all gathered outside. I believe they were having a bonfire outside when we all started telling ghost stories. As I was 11 or so, of course their goal was to try and scare me, which ultimately didn't work. And as the night progressed, I started hearing things in the surrounding woods, and then noticed a figure in the upstairs window looking down on everyone. I pointed it out, and when everyone came to look, as you would expect, nobody was there. I thought it may have been a cruel prank until I realized that every person was accounted for outside. For what felt like an eternity, I kept thinking about that figure in the back of my head as my thoughts raced through my head. I saw the face once again and made a slight comment about it, and at this point, the family seemed annoyed that I kept bringing up something that wasn't there. Later on in the night, my friend who I traveled with pulled me to the side and let me know that she did in fact see something as well, but was afraid no one would believe her as they didn't believe me. We left the next day, but the eerie feeling remained. Now I'm sure I know what you're thinking. Scary stories plus a child's active imagination equals seeing things that aren't real. However, just indulge me and keep reading. On February 14th, 2014, I was in middle school. It was Valentine's Day, and it was a Friday night before the weekend. That morning, my teacher handed out a word scramble for fun, where you make as many words with letters from the words you're given. Like the game Anagrams, the words were Happy Valentine's Day. The first word I came up with was death, followed by die. I kept circling back to those words, and they repeated in my head over and over. The school day ended, and as I was walking home, my house was surrounded by ambulances, and my grandfather walked to the bus stop and said something had happened, and we would talk about it later. To keep the story short, my stepfather had died in his sleep from conjunctive heart failure. I moved from that house to live with another family member after his death. When I turned 14, my great-aunt's boyfriend at the time had a heart attack and died. They had been together for a long time, but he never married her. He was often cold towards everyone in the family, and although they were together for a long time, he refused to marry her. Several years prior, that was the last time I had spoken to them, as my family were not close, and I mentioned the fact that they weren't married, and asked why that was. To be fair, children have no filter to say whatever they think in that moment. In that moment, I could feel the mood change and the tension could be cut with a knife, and his energy felt sinister, like his spirit was just evil, almost as if he was just surrounded by darkness. I hadn't spoken to them since that moment until I found out he'd just passed away. My family consoled my great-aunt, and we helped her pack the house up to get ready to move in with us, as she could no longer stay in the house. We finished packing up her house within 2 days, and towards the end, my aunt pulled me aside and let me know how thankful she was that I was there, but told me that when her boyfriend was having his heart attack, he pulled her in, and in a sinister tone told her, "If something happens to me, do not let your great-nephew in this house." Hearing that only caused me to have an off feeling while we were finishing up. Days after she moved into our home, I was sleeping, when what felt like sleep paralysis started to kick in. I laid in my bed feeling helpless when I saw a figure creep over me, screaming at me, and I will never forget the words it said. "Get out!" It screamed at me, shaking me, and I laid still. It then raised its hand at me and struck me in the face. I sat up quickly out of my sleep in a state of shock and in fear, thinking I just had the worst nightmare, my face burning from what I thought was just a dream. But when I touched it, I noticed it was wet. I rushed to the bathroom, noticing that there was now a gash on my face, and blood was dripping down. I never said anything because at the time my other family member that I lived with was having schizophrenic hallucinations and severe PTSD from being in the military. She had said she would see shadow figures, and I always assumed she was just having another episode. I didn't want to trigger another episode, so I created a rational explanation and kept it to myself. Not long after that, I moved, and the house we moved into was nice. It was big enough for all of us, and it felt like a good fit. During the showing of the house, the basement door had a lock on it, and we were unable to view it at the time. We were assured that it was nothing, and when we moved in, we had the lock cut, and to our disbelief there was a letter and a pentagram painted in black on the wall. The letter stated that the previous tenant was involved in some sketch activities like witchcraft, and she said she had went too far and opened something she couldn't close. Thus, the move. Nobody had thought anything of it, as we all had no belief in anything like that, and I had suppressed those previous experiences as I rationalized them to just being an overly active imagination. Time went by, and we painted the wall, but the pentagram kept seeping through every time we painted, so we left it alone. There were often times where we would hear things through the night, such as creaking, cabinets closing, footsteps running through the house. But we were a big house, so we always rationalized it. At night I could hear a kid's giggle and footsteps running through the hallway. Cabinets started slamming oftentimes, and pictures would fall off the wall spontaneously. It got so bad that we ended up calling a priest out and asked him to bless the house. We didn't mention the pentagram, and when we walked in, he walked straight down the stairs to it as if he was drawn to it. He blessed the house, and we didn't have anything bad happen for a while. I was around 16 at the time when everyone decided to take a weekend family getaway, but unfortunately I had to work that weekend, as my job only allowed me to work weekends due to school, so I had to stay at home. I came home one day and had a cold, eerie feeling walking into the house, as I was a victim of a home invasion when I was younger, so since then I have always been extremely paranoid and on edge. We had several dogs, and we lived pretty secluded with neighbors close enough if something happened, but far enough if we wanted privacy. So I wasn't quite as anxious as I would normally be, but that eerie feeling never left. I decided to call it a night, and my dog followed me to bed. I was laying there tossing and turning for probably 15-20 minutes, when I noticed that one corner of my room looked extremely dark, darker than normal. The bedroom window normally cast a shadow in that corner, but this time it was pitch black, like I couldn't see through it. In the same moment I noticed it, my dog peered her head up and faced the corner as well. She started growling, and I tried to shush her, assuming it was nothing. She started growling louder and louder. The hair on her body stuck up, and she was snarling. It looked like she had an extreme case of rabies. I had never saw her like that, growling, barking, and foaming at the mouth at the edge of my bed. I kept trying to calm her down when she lunged at the corner, barking as if she saw an intruder. I quickly turned the lights on, and the shadows in the room were filled with light, and she shortly calmed down. I convinced myself that it was nothing and tried to go back to sleep. I laid back down only to awake to the sound of her growling as she was before in the corner of the room. I tried to grab my pillow and head to my car to sleep. As I looked back to my bedroom window, it was completely black, and my stomach dropped from a feeling I can't explain. I never stayed in that house alone again. I haven't had anything like that happen for a while, as I live in an apartment with other people. But every now and then I feel like I'm being watched. I have nightmares sometimes and sit up in the middle of the night in darkness with unexplained fear. Honestly, I feel like I'm a pretty normal person with some unexplained things that have happened that I keep suppressing. Do you think this is all in my head? I find myself still trying to rationalize everything with nobody to turn to who would believe me, or wouldn't think that I needed to be locked up in an asylum. 3. I will begin by telling you some details that are important. I am a 26-year-old guy. I live with my parents in our house that is in the village in the countryside of Croatia. The houses are built in a way that you have a classic road, then you have canals on each side of the road that separate the road from the sidewalk. Canals are about a length of the house, mostly, and so you have so-called driveways about the size of a car where you can park and access your yard. A lot of the houses here were built with the purpose of bedrooms facing the street. Mind you that the sidewalk is right in front of the houses, and anyone can access the windows of many people's houses, unless those that were a bit further from the sidewalk and have a fence around the house. Anyhow, there is a set of 4 windows on my house facing the street. 2 are for my parents' bedroom, and the other 2 are my bedroom windows. The window is about 175 to 180 centimeters height from the ground, so I can see most people's heads when I'm sitting in my room looking out the window, and when I'm standing in my room I can clearly see people to their waist. And people can see inside my room if they'd look. People that do pass by, and rarely older people from 60 to 70 years old, some younger people, but not very often. One window of mine has a broken roller blind, and that window is beyond my bed. It is always closed, especially as the blinds cannot be lifted. The other window is the one I use. I have a cat whose scratcher is right on the window, so he can look outside on the street. My table where my PC and PlayStation are in that corner of the room, and as I'm sitting at my desk I can see outside, and in the evening during the night you can see inside very clearly if the blinds are lifted, of course. Now, that I said all this, you have some idea of how things are. It brings me to whatever has been happening. 3 or 4 weeks ago, I was playing Rocket League with my friend, as we do almost every day in the evenings. From around 7 to 11 o'clock in the evening, we usually play Rocket League or sometimes something else, but mostly Rocket. So 3 or 4 weeks ago, as we were playing, my window was open because it was hot in my room, since I have a furnace in my room for heat. The window was open, but the roller blinds were down. They can be fully closed, lifted, or I can call it half open. When I say half open, I mean they are down, meaning I can't see outside and nobody can see inside. But there are little holes in the blinds that let air inside, and I do have them like that because I have a house cat that doesn't go out without being on a leash with me. Anyways, as I was playing that evening, someone knocked at my roller blinds 3 times like knock, knock, knock. My first thought was that this high school kid that lives a few houses away from my place, he is a douchebag, to put it nicely. The classic wannabe hotshot building muscle, desperate to get girls, yet disgustingly disrespectful towards women and elders. He and his brother, whom I hung out with a bit before, realizing they're the types that would pull pranks on you and annoy you with words and stupid jokes or deeds. His older brother left for the army last year, so the guy is alone here, but has friends. Anyhow, I was 100% sure it was him messing with me, as he probably heard me talking and laughing through the window, playing with my friend while on Discord. The first time I heard those 3 knocks, around 7 in the evening, I removed my headset and yelled, "What is it? What do you want?" But heard nothing and got no response. I shook it off as him trying to be funny while he was passing by towards the center of the village. I continued to play. After about 30 minutes, 3 knocks and my roller blind again. This time I found it annoying. I tend to get quite angry playing Rocket League, as it is, because the game is full of incompetent players, so I was triggered. At this point, I closed the window and pulled the roller blinds up to be able to see who was knocking on my window. After some time, maybe 20 to 30 minutes, I heard distinct 3 knocks, but this time the sound was different, as if the person is knocking on the glass of the window, not the roller blinds. That window was next to me to the right, so I got up, opened the window, and poked my head out and looked outside. Saw and heard nothing. I closed the window again and continued to play. After about an hour, again 3 knocks, but this time it sounded like it was once again on the roller blind. Now fully angry at whoever is messing around with me, I took a cigarette and went outside to inspect everything. Nobody on the street. It's about 9:20 at this point during the evening. I look behind my house, inspect all the possible hiding places around the house, and I see nothing. Mind you, there are no trees or branches anywhere near my house, especially windows facing the street. I got inside. Continued to play with my friend. And about 30 minutes pass by, 3 knocks again. I jump up and in a matter of seconds open the window and put my head out to catch the culprit. Again, nobody is there and I hear nothing. No footsteps, no laughing, whispering, talking, nothing. Frustrated, I closed the window and pulled the roller blinds all the way down. An hour later, around 11 o'clock, maybe 11:10, I hear the last 3 knocks on the roller blinds. That was it. I was 100% certain it was that guy pranking me, because he originally heard me through the window. But then, still, to harass me for 4 hours and linger around on the street and my house, for me to not catch sight of him knocking even when it knocked on the glass window, to see no hand even with the corner of my eye, I found it odd, but knew it was him, because he is the only one that could do that. Go figure, some fun knocking on a 7-year-older dude for 4 hours. Even for a high schooler, that is too much time to spend committing to that. Then about 2 weeks later, a week ago, the setting is the same. I'm playing Rocket League with a friend, headset on. It was sunny, so the roller blinds were lifted, but window closed. My cat was looking at the sunset outside. Meow. A little after 7 o'clock again, 3 knocks in my roller blind. I look through the window, see nobody, and didn't want to open the window and look out fully to not disturb my cat resting on a stretcher by it. I ignore it. About 30 to 40 minutes later, again 3 knocks. Now I get up quickly and open the window and look outside. My whole upper body out the window. I see and hear nothing. I close the window, continue playing. Maybe 20 minutes pass by and again 3 loud knocks on what seems to be the actual window side, wooden framing around the window. This day it feels more like 3 bangs rather than 3 knocks. They are louder, more aggressive, all of them. So now I'm angry. Again I see and hear nothing. So I tell my friend I will be back in a few minutes. I keep the window open, and now I'm waiting like a predator by the window. But kinda hidden, but there enough to stop my cat from jumping on and out the window. I was there for about 30 minutes. Nothing happened. And it started to get cold, so I close the window and get dressed, go outside, and I inspect everything. Took a walk. Wouldn't I see this guy hiding further away from my house if he ran or something? I hear and see absolutely nobody. I go back inside and continue to play with a friend. Now it's quiet a bit longer. Now to stray away from it. That day, and prior to that very day, I've been praying, sort of. I've been praying to gods, all of them, to the universe, to aliens, to any form of higher power that would listen, including even Jesus Christ. and I pray to give me and my friend enough luck and skill, strength, and the ability to help us win our 3rd tournament of the season in Rocket League, as I was getting desperate to win the 3rd tournament and get a unique title that comes with it. Usually, whenever I'm speaking to those higher powers, I ask for health for my family, health and happiness for them, as I'm being good and healthy makes me happy. And I don't usually go around asking for much, but I'm quite competitive, and especially for games, and especially for Rocket League as it's my main game. Been dealing with Smurfs, aka cheaters and faulty servers that would make me and my friend lose the tournament in semi-finals, or the finals. So I was angry and desperate because I was so close to winning that title that we deserved for sure. Just needed a bit more luck, that's all. Now, I'm not religious, and my belief in God is not really as some creator with a beard hiding in the sky. I believe in aliens and advanced civilizations from space and from underground. I believe there are multiple species of aliens, from greys to those more humanoid ones. I believe in the creation story of the Anunnaki, that humans were genetically created and not evolved from monkeys. I believe the Bible says a lot about aliens and that Jesus Christ was an alien hybrid. I believe that religion is just a human concept, but that all gods were actually star people that our ancestors worshipped, because they didn't know any better. There is clear, undisputable evidence of that all over the world, from cave drawings, texts and carvings, monuments, extraordinary sites like the Göbekli Tepe, and the pyramids and monoliths, etc. Call me an ancient alien fan in a way, but I really love reading and researching about those things, and I'm familiar with a lot of abduction stories and UFO crashes, UFO sightings, and many things some people have never heard of. That being said, when it comes to paranormal stuff, I've always been skeptic, and chose to be skeptic because of fear. I had one paranormal experience as a kid, not to go into too much detail, but I saw the shadow of a man when I was around 7 years old. My sister saw it too, but today she has no memory of it, but we both saw it, looked at each other, and were frightened. It got stuck in my head like it was yesterday. Anyhow, I chose to not really believe and be a skeptic about that because I'd be scared to experience that. If I saw an alien, I'd be shocked, but I think curiosity would defeat any fear if they were not hostile towards me. Yet if I saw a ghost or a demon, I'd be like, nope. And I am sooner to believe in ghost spirits that make sense to me, more than demonic activity. I watch a lot of paranormal stuff, mostly ghost stories and poltergeist stuff, which often ties to aliens as well, but demons, you see, with my belief of what and who the gods are about the universe, I wouldn't say that Satan exists, or heaven, or hell. So despite the documented demonic possessions, I refuse to believe such a thing and think there is something else at play here. I say I refuse to believe that because that is scary to me. Land a UFO ship in my yard and I'll offer them a beer, but demonic harassment? Yeah, I'm a pass. Anyhow. That being said, on that day, a week ago, after starting to go crazy with the banging sounds, always in 3, there came around 10:45 when I heard 2 bangs now, 2 on the window, again on the wood frame of it, from the outside, a bit quieter this time. I had no response at this point, and just rolled the blinds all the way down, continued to play and try and focus. Then, around 11 o'clock, a bit later, 11:10, 15, I heard the final 3 knocks again, only this time it sounded like it either came from above the window or from the attic or ceiling. Those were loud again, and by now I had no idea what to think anymore. Now bear in mind, these tournaments I play on Rocket League, they're every 2 hours throughout the day, from 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. I begin to play around 6 p.m. The first tournament I play is in 7 p.m. The second and the last one of the day is 11 p.m. In between tournaments, we play casual or competitive for fun, but tournaments is where we truly do our best. Now, the last few days, I played solo around 7 p.m. because my friend was mostly unavailable at that time. Nothing was going on, would play in 11 p.m. and hear nothing. For days after that first day, the knocking occurred. Then a few days, I mostly watched the show on Max, after losing the 7 p.m. tournament rather quickly, in a matter of 10 to 15 minutes. No knocking or banging. And now, just last night, the season is ending this week in Rocket League, so tournaments are all 1 hour earlier. I played the one at 6 p.m. alone, lost quickly, went to watch the show till 10 p.m. 10 p.m. my friend comes on, we lose the first chance, on to the second chance. If you lose the first match of the tournament, you can register again for a second chance tournament. We got to second chance and are playing. We lost and were done with the tournament at around 10:35 to 10:40. I heard no banging that day. I had a smoke outside in my yard, came back inside. We played some matches, and around 11 o'clock, after 11, in the middle of my friend talking, I heard the loudest 3 bangs ever. It seemed like they came from the left where there was nothing but a closet. It had no distinctive sound as the bangs on the window glass or roller blinds made. This was so loud as if someone fired 3 shots from a gun inside my head. It seemed like it came from the left and from the ceiling. It was so loud and violent it shook me to my core. I was frozen in place, and it surprised me so much, and it's like it came from nowhere. My heart was beating so fast like it was gonna jump out of me. Those were the only 3 bangs of the evening. I was up until 3:30 a.m., couldn't even sleep. Nobody but me hears those bangs, not my parents, not my friend through the microphone. The weird part is, when I come outside and knock on my own window, especially if I bang on it hard, my cat comes to the window and looks freaked out. Whenever I heard the mysterious knocking and banging myself, my cat lowers its ears like he hears something, but doesn't react at all and keeps sleeping. Yet if I bang like that, he jumps up and looks at me freaked out through the window. Even if I bang on the table with my fist while I'm inside, he gets startled. Now when I play and it's going bad, or we deal with cheaters or bad teammates, we both curse a lot in our language, and in Croatia, the most common and popular curse words are that of cursing God, Jesus Christ, and mothers. Not proud of it. But Croatian language is very rich in curse words. All my life cursing like that, and at certain points in my life felt strongly against any sort of religion in general, feeling like an atheist. Though nowadays I say I'm agnostic as I don't believe nor deny the existence of God. But like I explained earlier, gods to me are aliens, advanced beings from space and from underneath the earth, so go figure. Also, last night, after those extremely loud and violent bangs only I heard, I talked to that high school dude, and he swears he was not banging or knocking on my window or house at all at any time. I don't know, I would certainly catch him, I feel like. No way that him or anyone could be that fast, as it takes me seconds to open the window after I hear the banging. And to not hear any footsteps or running or giggling or any sort of evidence that it is a person harassing me. To not see any sort of movement through the window. And then the banging seems to move now, coming from above my head, from my ceiling attic. And the last night, from the left of me, and there's nothing but a closet and a wall. I don't know what to think, guys. Feel like I'm going crazy. I only hear that when I have a headset on, when I'm playing Rocket League, and when I'm playing with my friend. The sound does not come from the headset nor the game, as I use Discord on the phone for communicating with a friend. And I play the game on PS4 with very little sound, unhearable while having a headset on. It happened 3 times now, 3 or 4 weeks ago in the span of 4 hours from 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. Last week the same, and last night just 1 time, loud 3 bangs around 11 p.m. These are not slow bangs, they are relatively quick, like when a human would be knocking on the door. What do you think is happening, and what should I do about it? How to prevent this? Thanks for your time. I know I wrote so much. Hellfreezer's note. First thing I would do in your situation is I'd want to eliminate any rational explanations, so swap out your headphones for something else for a bit, see if that makes a difference. I think we can certainly rule out your young neighbor, as the sound does seem to be coming from places that he couldn't possibly reach. But keep an eye on it, or keep an ear on it, and see what happens. 4. Linwood. It was there that I spent the majority of my life. My grandma had finally gained custody of my brother and I after my biological mother had kidnapped us and ran off to Florida with us. My brother and I were thrown in the back of a paint van with no windows on top of a mattress and driven straight from Dunedin, Florida to our humble Davis, West Virginia. I can remember that drive back vividly with no stops, no bathroom breaks, like a literal child hostage. Once we had got closer to our grandma's and into town, I remember being so excited and looking out the front window, smiling ear to ear. While driving through town, I saw what I thought was my grandparents standing on the side of the roadside, outside of our local laundromat. She and I made eye contact, but her face was held low and her eyes veered up, staring expressionlessly into what felt like my soul. I could feel the hatred. At the time, I had really thought nothing of it. I thought maybe she didn't see me, or maybe she was finishing up some errands and didn't know we were in town. A few moments later, we pulled up to our apartment complex. I ran out of the van and my dad was outside waiting. I jumped into his arms with so much joy, shouting, "Where's Grandma? Where's Grandma?" And my dad told me that she was right down the sidewalk in her apartment. I was a bit confused, but ran down there, and she was crying tears of joy, holding my brother and I in her arms. Again, this was something that didn't register until a few years later, but whatever that was that I saw, that I made eye contact with, was not my grandmother. She had later told me that she had made a deal with God that if he would bring back my brother and I safely to her, that she would bring us both to Christ, which she did. I can only speculate that whatever I saw that day was some type of manifestation of evil. Things were normal for a short while. I, like any other kid, playing in my backyard, specifically in our apple tree, as it was a small community, and there weren't a lot of kids around. I spent a lot of time in that backyard alone. I remember being out there and looking up to the apartments and seeing a boy and girl that looked almost grey-washed to me, standing in front of their kitchen window. They just stared at me expressionless. I didn't feel anything. I thought they were just kids. I got excited and ran up to ask them if they wanted to play. However, no sooner did I top the hill from our backyard and they were gone. I asked my grandma if we had gotten new neighbors or if there were any other children in the building, and there weren't. Another instance playing in this backyard, I remember seeing this flash of red go all the way across the backyard and rounded the apartment building. I wholeheartedly thought this was another child, so I jumped up and began to chase it, but as soon as I rounded the same corner, there was nothing. This was when I began to realize something wasn't right. As time passed, it seemed like things progressively got worse and more scary here. The most common occurrence would happen when I was alone. Dad was on a drug bender, my brother was sleeping over at a friend's, and Grandma was upstairs asleep in her room. I'd be downstairs watching TV in our living room, relaxing in our lazy boy, when out of the blue I would instantly feel a presence behind me. It petrified me. It felt so evil and so strongly that I didn't want to move, but the feeling was overwhelming. I was too scared to breathe, and I couldn't look behind me because I feared what I might have seen. It didn't take long for the terror to become too much, and I would jump out from the chair and run like my life depended on it through the kitchen, up the steps and into my bedroom. This whole time I feel it. I feel it on me. I'm not fast enough to escape it within each second that passes as I'm leaving. I feel as if it's going to drag me back down the steps until I finally reach my bedroom and I turn and slam my door. And it was like a pair of scissors cutting a string. It was gone. I couldn't feel it. It wasn't there anymore. This happened on more occasions than I care to remember. But it was my reality. It was during this time that I was still sleeping in bed with my grandma. My dad would stay up all night reading his satanic books and watching The Exorcist on repeat. To say this traumatized me is putting it lightly. I feel like my own father, the one who was supposed to protect me, was bringing these evil things into our home that were targeting me. When the first Harry Potter movie came out, I was such a big fan. The church we were attending at the time condemned it, but I didn't care. I knew it wasn't evil. I had a poster of the 10 Commandments on my wall above my bed, but after one generous shopping trip, I got a Harry Potter poster, calendar, and 2 dolls. I removed my old poster and hung those up in its place, and went to bed with my grandma so happy that night. I woke up the following morning and walked into my room and saw the poster and the calendar still hanging but shredded. It looked as if someone took a knife and made vertical cuts in both of them, utterly destroying them. Nothing like this had ever happened before, and I was so upset. I cried. We never got nice things. I blamed my brother. It was just too weird and too much of a coincidence, but to this day and ever since, he has always denied doing that. And he never did anything like that before. He was the good kid. I had no reason not to believe him, and he has no reason to lie about it now. The energy in that apartment was unreal. I can remember being as old as 12 years old and laying in bed beside my grandma, and she's fast asleep. I lay there looking at the glow-in-the-dark stickers I put on the nightstand beside me, thinking they'd bring me some comfort. I slept with my Bible in reach and sometimes under my pillow. Each night I'd say bedtime prayers, and after I finished I'd still lay there, feeling the energy building up. I'd watch it sometimes until a certain point anyways. A mist, a black mist manifesting out of nothing but the darkness in the top left-hand corner of our bedroom. It started off small and it was smoky. It would appear as a shadow cast on the wall, even though the lighting and contrast didn't make sense. It would grow in size, getting bigger and bigger until eventually it was taking over the whole roof. The feeling was suffocating. I always thought I was going to die. This was it. I prayed to God and begged for mercy as I covered my head with my blankets, thinking, if it thinks I'm asleep, it'll leave me alone. If it thinks I'm asleep, it'll leave me alone. Until I eventually passed out. This was a regular thing that happened. I remember the visual, but I'll never be able to shake the feeling of what I believed to be true evil. Another night I remember waking up from a dead sleep. I could move, fully awake, no sleep paralysis, and I looked to the foot of my bed. Now this instance felt very real to me, as did the bee swarm I described earlier, but could it be hypnopompic hallucinations, dreamlike hallucinations that occur while you're waking up? This would have only been the second occurrence, if so. Anyways, I see what appears to be a knife sawing through the drywall of our bedroom. I watch it as it continues and makes the shape of an upside-down U, and suddenly the drywall is pulled into the wall. I continue watching as a demonic-looking creature between 2 and 3 feet tall emerges from the wall. Pays no attention to me, as if I'm not even there, and it walks out of our bedroom. That's the last thing I remember of that, other than the following morning, I walked over to the wall and examined it, and it looked untouched. Occurrences such as these plagued my childhood. I'd see faces in mirrors and windows looking back at me, demonic-looking shadows, all with the presence of evil enveloping you. 5. This happened to me about 6 years ago. I'm a very stable, late 40s, married mom of 3. I'm an American, but have lived in northern Germany with my family in a small, relatively rural community for over 20 years. I know this environment very well, and I'm bilingual. As I often used to do, I would load my female Labrador Retriever into my car and drive about a mile outside of our village into the countryside a little, so my dog could get out and run free. She was a wonderful dog, attentive and very devoted to me. She stayed in my area when we were out in the country, and we both stayed relatively close to my car. I would smoke a cigarette out there, and she would run around. We were always there in the daylight, and sometimes there was a jogger or a farmer on a tractor in the distance, but we were normally alone, and again, this is a very safe area. Because I'm American, probably, I am nevertheless semi-hyper-attentive to my surroundings, and, just in case, always carry pepper spray. Plus I have the big dog. The landscape is low and sparse, brushy, a few scattered trees, but mostly flat marshland, and you can see all around you. You can see through and between the foliage to see a rabbit run, for example, and the land is vast, sparse, flat, and marshy. So we always drove down to the end of a dirt road, not into a clearing, just into a flat, low brush, high visibility, country field landscape. So 2 things happened in this same location, with just me and my dog present on 2 separate occasions. They might seem like no big deal, but I don't understand, and although I was never frightened, I've always been bothered. The first thing that happened was that I, with my dog, she actively watched this event, observed a small brown leaf, just a singular dead dry tree leaf, hang suspended, moving only about an inch in any direction, in front of us for at least a full minute. Let me explain. There was no wind, no invisible spider web or filament holding it, no tree or bush suspending it. It hung, moving slightly, independently in the air in front of us, between us. Directly in front of me, at my eye level, my dog looked up to it. I plucked it out of the air, and we left. Drove home. I wasn't frightened, but it was memorable and odd. My dog fixated on the leaf as well. When it was in my hand, I showed it to her directly, and as I said, we packed up and left. But it was like watching magic. I stood there and watched it. Within this same time period, but on another trip to the same location, in broad daylight, I heard someone call to me. Please, and I thank you for your patience, let me explain. I won't use my real name. In this sparse German rural countryside with only my dog present, I heard this sentence. Julie, I can see you. I heard it from a specific direction. It was crystal clear to me, and I would say it sounded like from a distance, almost as if low shouted, but not too far away. Like 100 to 200 yards away was the feeling of distance and volume. Obviously no one was there. Flat fields and low brush weeds, nowhere to hide or stalk. No point of secret approach. Even worse, although I didn't recognize the voice, I would say it was male. It was absolutely a non-accented native English, so this was not a German person. And anyway, there was no person present. If there had have been, I would of course been terrified, but my dog and I were completely alone as far as my eyes could see. I still can't explain this. More than clearly hearing the voice, and even more than hearing my name, it was the perfect-sounding neutral American English of the voice in that environment. Apparently, for me, that freaks me out. Do you guys get me? I'm in the middle of nowhere in Germany. I myself have a regional American accent. This was a moderate tone, like a newscaster. I know exactly what I heard. My dog did not react to this call, this voice that said exactly what I wrote above. She didn't seem to register it at all. We packed up and went home. I can't explain this. I am a spiritual person, open-minded and a religious believer. This hasn't changed me or even traumatized me. But it happened just like I've written, and while both experiences did not feel frightening or threatening, they definitely felt strange and otherworldly, if you will. I can't reconcile these moments. Anything involving drugs, side effects of mental health, audio disturbances, hidden stalkers, stress, trauma can, fortunately, be excluded from theories. Believe me, I've thought about it all. I'd love to hear what anyone thinks. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Paranormal Stories, episode 418. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Before you go, please hit the like button and subscribe if you'd be so good. And if you'd like to support my channel, you can do so by supporting me on my Patreon page, linked in the description. You'll also find a link there to my merchandise store. And you can leave a tip for this or any other video by clicking on the heart with the $sign underneath the video. Okay, we have no more business today, so let's move on to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is: if you had a choice in only watching horror movies and its various permutations for the rest of your days, or only watching anything but horror movies, what would you choose? I think I'd probably go with the horror because, as I said, there are many variations of horror comedy, sci-fi, drama, many unique takes on the genre, so there would be enough in there to keep me happy, and I do tend to gravitate towards either horror and sci-fi kind of movies anyway. Not exclusively, but most of the time. Let me know what you think in a comment below. And before we go, let's take a look at the answer of the day from a previous video. This one comes from Paranormal Stories 336, and it was about foods you tried when you were younger, and you just didn't have a good experience with them, so you were put off by it. But you might be willing to try it again now that you're older. Today's answer comes from Witchy Nicole. For me, it is eggplant and/or lamb. I tried it when I was younger, but would be willing to try it again if it were properly prepared. And I think that's what it boils down to a lot of the time. I think I gave salmon as my answer in this question. Then I realized a few weeks later, by that point I'd started eating sushi, and I eat I won't go for a ton of sushi, but I eat a lot of sushi. I pick it up now and again when I'm out. And there's salmon in that a lot of the time, so apparently I had salmon since, although it had been literally decades before I even had any, because sushi was something I only tried when I was in my 30s. So I guess I'm more open to the salmon than I realized, and would be willing to have it cooked, like prepared again, depending on how it was prepared. Thank you very much for your answer, Witchy Nicole. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.